week, and I noticed that most of our crappie that we're catching, the bigger ones that we're catching, are all up real shallow. They're in. I'm catching some at 2 foot to 4 foot deep. But like he said, back in the fall when they were roaming in big schools chasing bait and everything, we was out over that 15 to 20 foot just looking for bait fish, and you was catching those crappie running around chasing bait, scoping them. I use an active target too with Lowrance, but that was one thing. And then the brush piles out deeper, and that's just you got to get out off the bank, get out there where the channel drops and stuff. But there is a lot all the lower end of this lake has plenty of deep water, and there's deep water up the river too. But you just got to stay out off the bank a little bit. Yeah, that's Canoe Creek. Yeah, I mean, if you're not finding any water less than 10 feet on any or more than 10 feet on any Henry, you might ought to bring your boat up here and let Israel and them check out your electronics. Some of your settings or something, maybe you may be reading meters or something instead of feet. I don't know, because there is a lot of deeper water than 10 feet on the lake for sure.
And I will tell you myself, because when I first moved here, I did a video series on bass fishing, moving here from California. My first thought is deep water, especially in the summer, and where Palmetto, they call it Permitter Creek or Palmetto Creek, connects with Canoe Creek itself. There's a point out there, and it was loaded with fish. And I threw crankbaits and jigs and big worms for hours and never got a bite. Someone goes, "Those are crappie." And that's right on the point out there where those two things come together, and it drops off into 15 feet or better.
It's a big, long point that runs out, but it's probably 250 yards out there off the bank before it really gets out there into that 15-foot water. It's a long ways out off the bank.
But that was in the summertime, and they were crappie.
He's not finding anything more than that. That's something that you may need to Israel or them to look at, or any of us or anybody look at your electronic, just to make sure all your settings are good, because there is plenty of deep water on there.
It could also be maybe that, like you say in the settings, your screen, maybe it's on manual and it's stuck on a certain depth level and you're not seeing it. So, but that's something that we can do. Okay, this time of the year, I'm going to throw a question out here. Give them a progression, Lee, to start with, and then how you tend to do things. When you're starting to look for crappie that are beginning to spawn, do you start in a certain way, pre-spawn, to spawn, and then do you start deep, look shallower? How do you progress?
That pretty much, I'm going to start deep. I'm going to start out there at the mouths of these bays, because what they're doing, they're migrating. They're coming in from where they've been all winter long out there in that deep water on structure, holding, just getting ready. And what they're doing, we do a lot of long line trolling as they're coming in. You can cover a lot of water that way. And also the fish, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but as they're starting to spawn and starting to go towards the areas that they will spawn, they're just chasing bait. So that long line trolling is a good way to cover a lot of water and find these fish. But you can tell as it gets closer to spring, the more into your late March, April type weather, they're wanting to find some wood cover. They're wanting to get shallow. And you can see as they're migrating and coming in, they'll get deeper and deeper and deeper back into the creeks. And like Scott was saying, that 2 foot of water, sometime if you got, I've caught 15, 20 fish off of one little old stick up, they'll find wood to get around. They love these shallow docks. Once it gets, the sun gets up higher and they're really wanting to get and beat and bang around that wood cover, that's the type of things that I look for.
Scott, what about you?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me. At Logan, at Neely, like I came up here a lot this time of year, and we just fish down the banks a lot. I mean, I'll fish a dock when I come to it. If it's a log, I'll fish it. If it's a brush, I'll fish it as I'm going down the banks. But at Logan, me knowing it a lot more, I'll fish a lot of hard places too. Seems like those big black crappie get up on the real hard places, like some rock that's real shallow. And if there's any brush around it, it helps. But I can pull up on a little pond down at Logan Martin. At the top of it's in 4 foot of water, and those big black crappie will be up there spawning, making beds, and you'll just catch, like he was saying, you might catch 12 or 15 of them at one time, just real quick, and then it'll slow down. Now on the docks, it seems like I went twice this week, and it seems like there's a lot of people doing it now, and that's good. I like that. But when you pull up to a dock, and I can actually see 15 or 20 under there, but like the first 2 or 3 shots under there, you might catch one, and then it slows down. I don't sit there and try to make them all bite. I just go to another one. So they're a little bit smarter right now than they have been, because they've been caught a bunch and they're getting caught and getting fish for a lot. but I still think there's another big wave. I think our best wave is probably yet to come. It may be on this next moon or something, because the ones that I'm catching now are not, like in the fall, they were all real big ones, and it seems like they're just in that in between now, catching a lot of smaller ones and stuff up real shallow. You're catching some big ones mixed in, but a lot of smaller ones, and I think that next wave may be our best one of the year.
Is that a factor of the weather that we've gotten with the rains and kind of keeping we got real cold for a while there, kind of later in the year than usual, and we got all this rain. Is that what's keeping them kind of out a little bit more?
I think so. I fish a lot of really way back places this time of year where they're going to go spawn. And we got some springs like in the back of Chuckerlock, or got some places up around Knox Landing. It's hard to get a boat into, and some guys in there fishing. They acted like it was better last week, and then we had those cold nights. I just think that this long drawn out spring is really, I think it's good for the fishing, but I think it's keeping a bunch of them held back.
Okay, Lee, with the fish being deeper like that, how do you tend to be able to locate? Is there something you look for on a map that might give you kind of an indication of where you might want to look, or is it something that you're just kind of more familiar with?
No, it's looking for the secondary points. Once they start making that move, they're going to start trying to hit the brakes. And when I say brakes, you're even if it's a 2 or 3 foot difference in the contour of the bottom, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at something maybe going into a pocket, the mouths of the pockets and things like that. Just something that you can follow them as they're going to spawn, because they're going to hit. Once again, the harder bottoms, they like that. They're not going to go in a bunch of silt and try to lay down. Riprap is real good when they start making that push to get up there and get right and get where they need to be. A lot of it too, you can check at different times through the day. When the fish start getting real shallow, that morning you may not catch them on some of your brush piles or some of the riprap. Once that sun gets up, that's going to push them where they need to get on that shade. They can get around a stump, Christmas tree, a rock, or something like that they can kind of get a break from that sunshine. So that's what I look for.
Does anybody else have any questions yet? I'll keep going. You know me, I'm a talker.
I got one thing to add to that. We probably take it for granted a little bit, Lee, and myself, because we're out there all the time. But when you're looking for these fish, especially before they go to spawn, when you're looking for them, and in the fall, if you're looking for them and you're wanting to do some trolling and things like that, right now, a good way to find them is make sure your electronics are dialed in really good, so you can ride around on plane until you start seeing bait on your 2D. When you start finding bunches of bait, that's where the fish are going to be. They're not going to be far from that bait.
Okay, so assuming these are people that are out here fishing for fun, they're maybe not trying to compete, or they just don't do it as much and they want to learn a little bit more. Give me 3 different rod and reel setups that they might be able to have that they can put in their boat to be able to accomplish what they need to do out there if they can't get a bunch of them.
It's hard to beat old school. Taking your a 6 foot rod, 5.5 foot rod with a float on it in the minnow is what everybody kind of grew up on, fishing brush piles, fishing stumps, things like that. And that works great when they're in that 3-4 foot of water on some kind of wood or on some kind of riprap or something like that. But when you're searching, and this is something a lot of guys say, well, that's what I like to do and that's what I'm going to do all the time. That's fine, that's great. But some days when it doesn't work and you're saying, I'm not getting bit anyway, trying something else, the trolling has really, really come along. It's been where when they're not really on structure, the fish are scattered out a little bit, they're not holding on anything, you can use your boat just like it's a floating dock. You're sitting there, got your rods out, you're moving around just trying to locate, pretty much finding the bait. When you find the bait, you're going to find the fish falling in. So that's another good technique that you can use. It's easy fishing. You're not doing a lot of casting on that. So that long line trolling is something that a lot of people are picking up on. It's helping them when what they usually do is not working. It's helping them have one more option to kind of find something else to catch fish.
What rod?
What length rod kind of setup?
Anywhere from, I don't use the 16s or the 14s like that because I have so many clients in my boat. They'll pick that big long rod up and they get a fish, reel it 2 foot from the tip, and then when you pick it up, you jumping up trying to pick apples to try to get it off of there. So, you know, it's one of those things. I like a 12 foot, and how I do mine, I call it my spread. I'll take my front rods with my longest rod and taper them down. That way, as I'm pulling, I'm using, let's say, a 12, a 10, and an 8. If I've got 3 on each side, I'm getting more of the water column that way. So I'm not just pulling the same trail with all of those baits close to each other. I'm spreading out where I'm really, really covering a lot of the water. So if I miss them by 10 feet, I've still got rods that can adapt to where the fish are setting.
Yeah, 25 foot.
So I can stretch it out a little bit that way. Another key to that long line that a lot of people kind of take for granted, try to keep your baits the same size jigs, same length of cast, because when you make your turns, if you've got an 8 on your inside rod, and then you've got a 32nd on that front one, and you turn it, and that 8's way back there, it's going to tie everything in a knot whenever you turn. If you got them all the same, about the same size, same length of cast, when you turn, they're going to fall the same and come back up the same, and it'll help you from getting frustrated, the biggest thing, and have to untie the knots on.
Scott, you're more of a caster when you're fishing. Kind of what are your typical setups?
Yeah, I like the shorter rods for shooting docks. I use all spinning reels, but I like the 5/6 rods for shooting docks. I'll use a 6-footer sometimes, but the 5.5 foot rod seems to be my most accurate rod for shooting docks. A medium light. I got several different ones. I got the ACC crappie sticks that they sell up here. I've got some Johnny Morris carbon lights. I've got 4 or 5 different ones. I'm really not too picky, as long as it feels good. And that's for my shooting docks. And then when I get to casting at brush or rock or anything, I go to a 6 and a 6/6. And then I fish a lot at Gunners Point in the fall, and I'm fishing a lot deeper. And I go to a 6/6, and I've even got a 7-foot rod that I really like for that. It's a medium instead of a medium light when I get a little bit deeper, so you can't feel them as good and trying to get a hook in them a little bit better. And I really like that. I stick with 4 to 6 pound line almost all the time. I just like that. I know you can go a little heavier and you can catch them, but the 4 I catch many as you want to catch on it. You don't have to worry about breaking them until you try to boat flip them and stuff. If you want to net them or lip them or ever how you want to do it is better when you got 4. If you got 6 on it, you can lift them up a lot easier. And you know, I vary a lot. My favorite, just a 1/16 ounce head, no matter what time of year it is, just about. But I'll go to a 1/32 all the way up to an 8, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm using active target and I'm actually trying to catch fish that are out roaming on bait, I like the 8 a lot more. I can be more accurate with my cast and get it to the fish a lot easier. And a lot of that depends on your bait too. If like we're shooting docks a lot. Most of the time, I'm using a Bobby Garland, just a baby shed, just the little straight tail minnow most of the time. But if I'm using like a Kalin's or a Strike King, anything with a curly grub, a little bit heavier head because the bait falls a little slower with those than it does with the Bobby Garland. So you just have to play with it and get comfortable with what you like. Another way that I really like to catch them, I don't do it as often, is fishing like rip route, long points, anything like that, is with a little cork and a jig, and that's really good this time of year as fish are getting up there on the bank. And you know, just any kind of cork. I use what they call a bubble cork a lot because it's solid plastic. It get tight on both ends. You can cast a lot further. But just 18 inches of line below it, maybe 2-foot at the most with a little jig, your favorite, and you can just wind it, stop it, wind it, stop it, and you catch a lot of fish real shallow like that.
One thing I've wondered myself. Do you guys have a preference for color of line? Do you go high vis or do you try to stay with clear line?
I played with all of it. I've done the fluorocarbon even down into 4 and 6, and I don't think it makes a difference. I use high vis yellow just about all the time.
He's asking if you use leaders with that high vis
The only
line.
time I use a leader is if I'm using braid, like schooling fish. I use a leader then.
Yeah, it's the high vis with me too. Like I said, I can see it better. And a lot of times, especially when you're crappie fishing, it's not an explosive strike. You want to watch that line, especially on your dock shooting. When you're shooting it under there and letting it sink, you got a little bow in the line. If it straightens out or all of a sudden it moves sideways, he's got it. So I like that. I like that high vis because my eyes aren't what they used to be, and I don't think it makes makes any difference, especially with our water around here, because you've got a little color to it anyway.
What about knots? What knots do you guys tie? I know you do a loop knot a lot when you're shooting docks, but is there something else you do when you're doing other techniques?
With me, pretty much that loop knot's what I use, because I'm either a 124th or a 132nd. I'll go to a 16th sometime, but especially I like that slow fall. And with that loop knot, I'll tighten it up a little bit when I'm shooting docks, just so it won't tangle in itself. But I like it because you're not dealing with a lot of weight, and it still gives that, especially with the baby shad, you don't have a whole lot of resistance in that water, but it still lets that bait have a lot of action to it.
I tie a loop knot.
Yeah, I use a loop knot just about all the time, no matter what I'm doing.
Yes, sir.
Jig colors, and how often do you change colors?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question too. I like
Yeah,
that.
no, that's a good one.
He's asking jig colors and how often does he change them?
I change a good bit, really. I mean, especially with the technology we have. Like if I'm up shallow and I can see the crappie there, I mean, I can see them deep, shallow, anywhere. It doesn't matter. If I know they're there and they're not biting, it's either color, and I'm really big on rate of fall. I think rate of fall makes the biggest difference. If you put a Monkey Milk Bobby Garland on and you can't get them to bite it with a 116, I go to a 124. Then I'll go to a 132nd. And I've seen it where you go the other way. I've seen it where they bite the 8th. They just want something reaction. So I usually have, I carry 5 crappie rods with me every time I go. And they're usually, 2 of them at least have a 16th on it with different color baits. And then the others are different sizes. So I'll play with the sizes probably more than I do the color. But color-wise, I like Monkey Milk. I like the Crystal Blue. There's several of them I like, just natural colors. The Live Memo is one of my favorites that's been out in the last couple of years. But then I go to some curly tail grubs and stuff, and I like the Acid Rain, which is a yellow and white, and then I like the John Deere Green, which is more green, and then one of the favorites that I like around here because of our watercolor is a black and blue with chartreuse tail, whether it be the straight tail or the curly tail.
Yeah, that with me too. It's one of the things I change quite often through the day. I've had people before tell me color doesn't make any difference, and I know I'm swapping out from our casting and dock shoot, but on that long line, sometimes I've got 9 rods out, and you go through a school of fish, and like Scott said, you can see them and you know they're there, and you've only got 1 rod that's getting bit every time you go through. I'm not real smart, but I'm gonna put that color on all of them, and you can tell the difference. A lot of times with me too, you can find a jig color that they're liking, and they're getting more action with it. I'll play with the head color too. I'll change that head out sometimes. Let's say you're black and chartreuse or June bug chartreuse, and you've got orange heads on, and then you swap over to a chartreuse head or even a pink. I use a lot of that pink too. I guess in this water color that we have, they can see it better or something, but you can tell a difference in it swapping colors around. So don't be afraid to try something new. High skies, I like that June bug chartreuse, black chartreuse, things like that. Some of the other times, depending on what kind of light conditions that you got is what makes me determine what I'm going to throw. So don't be scared to play with it. Change that color up a little bit. If you're seeing a lot of fish and catching a couple, start changing that color around. Sometimes you'll hit that right color to what they're wanting, and it'll bust them wide open.
Okay, let's do this. Let's talk. Let's say we're here on Neely Henry. We got a good, 1.5 to 2 foot of visibility, which is just a good stain on Neely Henry. Let's go conditions like today, and then let's go conditions bluebird. What would be a starting color for today, and what would be a starting color if it was bluebird outside?
I pretty much, now I'm not Lee on this, but I'm going out there to catch as many as I can every time. I start with either the black blue chartreuse or June bug chartreuse and work my way toward natural colors. The clearer the water, the brighter, the clearer the water, calmer the day and everything is the more natural colors I use. And it sometimes the crappie will just throw you a curveball. They'll want something real bright, and I'll buy jig heads, big bulk packs of them, just lead, and I'll be using that. But my favorite, as well as Lee, he just said it. One of his favorites is pink, and I buy a bunch of pink heads. I got chartreuse, pink, orange, and then natural. Well, I got white ones too. I don't hardly ever use the white ones. and I got black ones that I don't use either. But the pink, the chartreuse heads, the orange heads, and then not just the lead heads are the ones I use. And I'll just swap around. It don't take but a second to swap colors. I'll just swap around until I start getting bites, and then I'll try to stick with that. As long as they're biting, I'll stick with one color.
Yeah, pretty much, the same thing. Like I said, both of us, we've done it enough here on these waters. We're kind of got the same approach to it, so we're just saying the same thing again. But, I like those darker colors, especially with your Junebug, chartreuse, black chartreuse, blue chartreuse. It just tends to work real good on our Coosa waters. Sometimes in the winter, I know I'm jumping back and forth, but in the winter time when that water's clear, I'll go to your blue ice, and even with a monkey milk, on the Coosa, that monkey milk, you need some cleaner water with it. But just like you said, throwing a curveball to you, I've been in some heavy stain in the spring and put on that Bobby Garland Cajun Cricket, which has a lot of orange and some brown in it, and throw an orange head and just get slammed on it. So, and you really can't, once you drop it 6-8 inches in the water, you can't see it. But I guess in that stain, those fish can see it. So sometimes we overthink it, I think.
Anybody else got any questions?
I know my place a couple days ago, fishing for crappie, catching up with
He said he was
Yeah.
on Weiss Lake the
He
other
was
day
around bait
fishing for crappie and was catching nothing but stripers.
He's around a bunch of bait fish.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we just got to take what it gives us. There's been a lot of days we're out there and we're scratching our head not getting bit, and it's a blessing when you hit those white bass or stripes sometimes.
Yeah, I like to get my line pulled a lot of times, but same thing. I mean, he was talking about the trolling. I got into doing that a lot. I don't use as long a rods as Lee, but I just troll around, and I learned a little bit keeping the same size heads. I always would use different ones as long as I was going straight to figure out how deep they were and what they wanted. Because there's a lot to that trolling. Lee can probably tell y'all a lot about it. The speed of your boat keeps the bait a certain height, depth, and if you're not at the right depth, you're not going to catch them. And that's one thing I've learned about shooting docks and stuff. If you start shooting docks and letting it go to the bottom, if you get below them, it's a lot harder to catch a crappie than it is than keeping it above them. If you can keep your bait a foot above them, you're going to be a lot more likely to catch them than you are going below them. So the speed of your boat moving around with your trolling motor, trolling is a big deal. And I got into the spider rigging deal a few years ago, which is out in front of you. And we did the exact same thing. We used a cork that would be on the water just for your sight, really, because we had it weighted down, a split shot above our jig, and then a jig tip with a minnow in it. We had 4 or 5 different colors on. If they started biting one color, we'd change all over to that same color and catch a lot more. So you just got to pay attention to what's going on and what they like, and to try to keep it, try to put in front of them what they're liking that day.
Now, I know you guys both have bass boats, obviously. You both fish bass tournaments. You for a living, you fish for fun when it's bass tournaments. How do you set up a boat for crappie? Because I'm assuming if you're talking spider rigging, you're not going to have that on the deck of your Skeeter, and you're not going to have that on the deck of your Falcon. You could, but then you're kind of set. What's your deal? What boat do you run for your crappie stuff?
I use my boat, but I mean, my buddy had all the little rod, had 2 little rod holders. One holds 4 on this side and 4 on that side, and we just mounted them on the boat. But they make all that stuff now that goes over your seat post. They make all kinds of things. Lee will be one to tell you all about that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of years bringing a brand new boat home and getting the drill out and putting screws in it. That's not fun to do. So, like Scott said, there's so many different things now that you can get these accessories that you don't have to screw into your boat and do. You can take it out. When I first got into trolling, what I would do, and that's, now everybody's got the remote control, but then you had to stand on that button. I just lay 2 rods across the front deck and just keep an eye on them. I mean, until you figure it out, and there's no sense in putting all this stuff on your boat if you say, hey, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to screw all this stuff into my boat. But I like to, I've got the double seat systems that I can set 2 up front, 2 in the back, so I've got the holders on it. The biggest thing is, sometimes, you might just want to put one rod out on each side, one out the back or two, and you can kind of figure out how to run it, how to turn. It's not like you just make quick turns, you know. With the trolling, trying to make a real slow turn instead of a sharp cut. That way the lines can, you know, they don't get hung up as much. If you make a quick turn, everything's gonna tie the knot. And speed is the key. You'll get out there and play with them, and you can see these fish. Usually, if I'm running, let's say, 0.8, and the wind's pushing me at 1.2, and I'm getting bit at 8, but at 2, I'm not getting touched. It's getting that bait at the level where the fish are, getting it around them. A lot of times they don't want that bait too fast, don't want it too slow underneath them. So finding out where they are by watching your electronics. You know, I'm running Humminbirds, and I can get a good focus on where these fish are that I'm going over, and that determines what speeds I'm going to do and how I'm going to. Sometimes I may let my baits get a little further back if fish have been pressured a lot and they've had a lot of boats over them. I may let the baits get on back some, and I'm saying let some more line out, and that way the boat's already through them. They can calm down a little bit. Normally, I tell people when I can see these fish in their feed, when I go over them, I say, you got 20 seconds. And they'll look at me like I've lost my mind. And then after we've done it 3 or 4 times, they'll start counting down. Okay, get ready, here we go. And you can see it. And that's just because I know how far the baits are behind me, I know my speeds, and I know when the baits are getting to the fish.
So give me your favorite, like, memory of crappie fishing. Was it fishing with your dad? Was it fishing? Just give me a story, like one of your favorite things.
That's pretty hard to do. I didn't crappie fish a whole. I did it as a kid growing up a bunch because that's what we did with corks, minnows, and everything. And then I didn't do it for a long time. And in the last 10 years, it seemed like that's all I want to do is crappie fish. I got into it with some real good friends of mine. But I can remember, heck, I don't know if I was 4 or 5 years old, crappie fishing with my uncle, and we actually had a little Coleman heater, the ones that you'd light and it burned till it went out, and then it would just stay red the whole time. And we had minnows, and we were using minnows on there. I mean, and I did this 10 years ago again just to see it. I thought I was just dreaming things. But that Coleman, it was so cold. We had 2 of them in the boat, and I actually melted his seat that day on a bass tracker. It got too close to the seat and melted a bunch of the rubber off of it. But you would lift the minnows out of the water, and they would just instantly freeze. It was that cold. I mean, it was 10 degrees or something. It was so cold. But you'd drop it on that Coleman heater, and then he'd go back to flopping again. But when he was in the water, he wasn't frozen, obviously. So I just remember doing that and catching a bunch of big crappie as a kid on a minnow, watching that cork go under. And that's one thing I've done in tournaments. Not many times, but a couple of tournaments, I've actually got to use a float and fly, which is a catching bass on a crappie jig below a cork 8 or 10 foot deep. And it didn't matter if I was 5 years old or I was 45. I still enjoyed watching that cork go under.
Okay, now I'm not going to let you give your favorite story. So he does this for a living, year round, and he told me a story about, was it some brothers? He actually was cousins. He was actually afraid for his life. I'm going to let him tell this story. It's kind of funny, actually, now.
Yeah, it's hilarious now. You know, on the water and in the outdoors, things are going to happen. Sometimes it's just beyond your control. But I had 2 guys having a great time catching fish. Everybody's happy, smiling. I mean, it's just
So
things
the
are going
previous was they hadn't talked in a while, right?
Hadn't talked in 20 years. Had not talked in 20 years, and they were getting back together for this fishing trip that we were going on. And about midway through the day, I can feel tensions getting a little higher, and they start arguing. And these are grown people. These are not children. These are 70-year-old people. And
So we're just adult children.
yeah, words go back and forth, and I can tell nerves are getting frazzled a little bit. And it goes from everybody smiling, and when it got to the worst part of this, the rods are still bent over, and I'm just not saying nothing because I'm just staying back in the back. But once they're arguing, one's saying he's fixing to shoot the other one. The other one says, "I know karate, and I'll get that gun away from you before you ever have a chance to shoot me." some of the worst language I believe I've ever heard, and I'm in a bay,
And he played college football.
people are raking their yards and leaves, and they're all stopping and looking at me, and that there's nowhere for me to hide or go. And it gets out of hand. We finally get back to the boat ramp. We just call it. One guy won't ride with the other one, so he gets in the truck with me. He said, "You got to take me to the motel." Long story short, he lets me in on what all's happening. I said, "Well, man, you know, you guys started out great." He said, "That's what happened the last time." And I said, "What do you mean the last time? We hadn't talked in 20 years. We got in an argument, and we just now got back together." I said, "What did you get in an argument over?" "Well, we were out fishing together." And I said, "Looks like you fellas don't need to fish together." But long story short, the one guy left the other one. I had to take him to Georgia to get a rent-a-car, and that's the last we've heard.
Was the pistol actually pulled?
No, but the hand was in the pocket, and I was looking for the first place I could escape to.
It's only slightly worse than watching a professional tournament when they're all on ledges. Just slightly. Just slightly. All right. Anybody other have any questions for these guys? Yeah. So he's not a guide.
Oh, is that?
He's a professional fisherman, Bassmaster Elite Series pro, but he is Lee Pitts Outdoors, and I'm sure he probably does have a way to get a hold of him. Affordable half-day trips, full-day trips, whatever it want. He does not clean fish for you. You got to do that yourself.
No, not cleaning fish.
And he probably doesn't bring you a sandwich either. You're gonna bring your own food.
If I clean them, I'm eating them.
What?
If you ever fish me, you don't want to clean a call.
Okay, okay.
There you go. Well, yeah, Lee would be a great guide anywhere around the coast or anywhere around here for sure. He's a great spokesman for Bucks Island. But guys, even if you don't have a boat, man, I see guys out there at Logan Martin all week this week. Anywhere there was riprap or anywhere they could get to a point at Lakeside, at the ballpark at Logan Martin, guys are out there and they're throwing that cork and jig as far as they can out, and I see them catching crappie. So get those kids out on the water.
And you can do this from shore. I see people all the time at Palmetto Creek, Perimeter Creek, right down here in canoe. You can park your rig. Yep, just right down here. You can park it down here. Any of these causeways, any of the bridges, you guys feel free to go park through there. Just don't throw it out in the middle too much so that you get your lines run over by boats.
Unless you want a 19-foot skeeter, Bucks will hook you up today.
And
Yeah, you can see Katie if you guys want to do it from the water too.
this time of year, the next probably month and a half, 2 months, that's where the crappie are going to. You know, for the next 2 months or so, that's where they're going. They're going super shallow. They're getting on the bank. So really, you know, if you got a place that you can slip off to, this is the time of the year to do it.
Folks, we're going to wrap up the crappie seminar. They'll be here if you guys want to talk to them personally. And please, right here, feel free, grab a handful of these Rage Grubs for you. We're just gonna give away some of these Rage Grubs to you guys rather than do a full raffle today. But feel free, that's right there. Grab several of every color if you want to. Thank you guys.
Thank y'all.